The saddest, most interesting, and oftentimes the most memorable moments of their respective shows. A crucial story beat that can change the entire dynamic of the world, as well as raise the stakes of the plot. But what makes this such a prominent event that takes place in one's narrative? When discussing death in media, there are usually two categories this kind of twist falls under. Either it was built up well and set up to make you care for the character before their untimely demise, or it comes off as rushed and a poor attempt of tugging on the audience's heartstrings. To many people, the only thing that matters when it comes to the execution of this moment is if it can be considered as part of the former. Examples of character deaths that fall into this category would be Maze Hughes from Full Metal Alchemist, Kamina from Gurren Lagann, and Koro-sensei from Assassination Classroom. All of these are prime examples of the standard when it comes to death scenes. It builds up a character well, establishing a lovable personality, and then subverts expectations by pulling the trigger. But these scenes always seem to serve a dual purpose. Kamina's death takes the person that Simone relied on most out of the picture, forcing him to grow as a result. Koro-sensei's death was sad, but it also had a hopeful connotation, sort of like a passing of the torch, and Hughes' death renders all of his deductions about the military effectively useless, leaving the rest of the characters to pick up on all of the leftover pieces, moving the story forward in a more interesting way as a result. Point being, there's more to these events happening than, oh no, that one person died. Okay, I'm gonna keep this brief, mainly because if you clicked on a video named How Death is Utilized in Anime, you can probably tell there are going to be some spoilers for a lot of shows. When I get to each show on the list, there will be a spoiler warning for each one, as well as a timestamp to skip to the next part in case you're interested in watching it. Aside from that, there are countless other ways to explore this concept in fiction, which are just as effective as this. A pretty popular show by the name of Angel Beats has a setting that makes death a more inherently fascinating subject matter. Spoiler alert, by the way. In this anime, death is used as a means of establishing a character rather than progressing that character, defining their backstories as synonymous to their death. In this case, the character's death is supposed to show you what this person is all about, and why they feel the way they do. The theme of the show is finding the best in life, no matter how tragic or unfair it seems to be. This gives the thought of death a more hopeful connotation within the circumstances of the show, not necessarily happy, but something that the characters can use to get over their lasting regrets. It also makes the gimmicks of all of the characters more endearing. Like Yui, when she was first introduced, I thought she was kind of annoying, always picking fights with people for no reason and messing with Hinata. But when I learned about her backstory, it became clear why she acts that way. She was paralyzed at a young age during an accident and spent most of her life in a hospital bed because of that. So the reason why she was so energetic and hyperactive until her obliteration is that she never got the chance to act that way in her real life. When I rewatched the show recently, I noticed that, and it made me feel really bad for kind of hating her guts. In Angel Beats, one's passing is what made that specific character such a great character. So far, the methods used for delving into death as a topic serve the purpose of exploring the varied personalities that make up the main cast involved in some way. But that's not the case for our next anime. Death Note is a show that needs no introduction. I mean, it's got the subject of this video right there in the name. Spoilers, again. I find how this show portrays this concept to be unique. When people die in the setting the story builds up, it's shown to be not that big of a deal. I mean, it happens every freaking day, so of course the citizens of Japan would get used to it pretty quickly, and as long as it doesn't affect them personally, they wouldn't have reason to really care about it either. They come to accept it as the norm in their society, and just like the audience, they've been desensitized to it all. In this case, the use of the Death Note becomes a crucial factor in world building. It's a pretty cool way to get the people watching to feel a more natural shift in the perspective of society in this unnatural story about a magic notebook that can kill people. It's also used in a way that makes it more ambiguous who you're supposed to root for, at least until the end, where it's made objectively clear who the antagonist is. Because while you could argue that Light only kills terrible people, or people who would be a detriment to his mission, you also can't deny the fact that he's taking away the lives of of upstanding citizens and enforcers of the law, who by his own standards should be a part of the new world he sets out to create. It gives you perfectly good reasons to support either side, and when cracks start to form in Light's mentality, it starts to show how warped society has become, and how much of a nuisance his godlike image of himself has been. When more important characters die, the goal of the scene remains the same. The best example of this would be Shuichiro Yagami's death. In any other anime, the main character's dad dying would be a really heart-wrenching scene full of emotion. But because of the way that Death Note is structured, the most interesting part of the scene doesn't come from how Light will develop from this, it's whether Light really cares about his father or not. It's hard to tell if Light is acting in this scene, which could spark a lot of discussions about Light's personality as a whole. Even once you find an answer to this very open-ended question, this scene raises more questions, like how will Light deal with Mallow now that his only scapegoat is gone? Also, something about the scene that's pretty cool to think about is, since Light's dad died here, does that mean that he would have died a day after this if he didn't make the Shinigami Ideal? The Shinigami Ideal halves your lifespan in exchange for the ability to see everyone's name when looking at them. So if he didn't have his remaining lifespan, then that would mean he was only meant to live for 2 days or so, right? Maybe even less than that? Again, the intriguing aspects of the scene aren't how it will affect the other characters emotionally, but rather what these little details scattered about really mean. Details that wouldn't mean anything if they were placed in any other context. A character death like L's, while it may have sentimental impact on some people, isn't a crazy turn of events because it's so sad. It's a big deal because, dude, Light won. He got rid of the most dangerous obstacle in his path. Speaking of obstacles, ReZero is riddled to the brim with those. I probably could have used a more effective transition, but also, I won't really go into specific details about the show, so don't worry if you're concerned about that. Anyways, there's a lot of dying in ReZero, so much to the point that it's become a meme to fake spoil the plot by saying Subaru dies in the next arc or something. That shows that just like in Death Note, the audience has been conditioned to expect a lot of bloodshed in the coming episodes. With every loop, Subaru learns something new about the current situation a bit at a time. So in this case, dying, while very terrifying and painful, becomes an essential component to the driving force that moves the narrative forward. Each piece of information gathered from Subaru's experiences are an absolute necessity for Subaru as well as the audience to piece together the mystery surrounding each arc. So like Subaru, we don't just start to see him dying as the norm, we see it as a prerequisite to get shit done, which is what the show starts deconstructing in the second season. The word I would use to describe how ReZero takes advantage of its premise like that to make the audience really connect with and think like Subaru is simply brilliant. The same word that I would use to describe a certain show that doesn't get as much credit as it deserves. And what's equally brilliant is the way this show subverts the expectations it sets up, by taking Subaru's return by death ability out of the equation, thereby making the viewers, along with Subaru, realize how horrible having this mentality is. Definitely a unique spin on the isekai genre. And if we're talking about death and the isekai genre, I feel like we kind of have to bring up Sword Art Online. No matter what your opinions are on this particular show, you cannot deny the fact that death plays a significant role within its setting. Much like Death Note, Sword Art Online uses death as a means of fleshing out the world, but unlike Death Note, Sword Art Online kind of fails at doing that. It starts off well enough by presenting Aincrad in a unique manner at the time, and it even does a good enough job of killing off characters that people may care about. It pretty decently creates the illusion that just maybe, if they aren't careful, oh wait, Kirito and Asuna are so stupidly overpowered that it really doesn't matter anymore. With a premise like a death game, atmosphere is vital when it comes to presenting said premise in an effective way, and looking at how often the plot of each episode revolves around Kirito and Asuna just hanging out with each other, I'm more inclined to feel really relaxed and comfortable rather than on the edge of my seat and terrified. The mood of SAO is the strongest in the beginning of the story, where the threat of death is more prominent. Everyone starts at a low level level, people start to give up on escaping the game, and more experienced players acted selfishly in the beginning, causing tension between beta testers and the newbies. This problem within the game's society of players could be tackled in provocative ways. Seeing examples of prejudice, like refusing to sell items to certain people or guilds taking advantage of their powers to bully townspeople, would only add to the challenge that Kirito would have to go through to clear this game. But this subplot doesn't seem to have lasting consequences. Exploring the social structure that could be formed in a situation like this would be engaging to watch. It would be a better way to build your world than killing off a bunch of NPCs off screen. When you look at how SAO utilizes death, it honestly feels like they should have instead gone into how game mechanics work in order to establish how Aincrad functions, which is fundamental to building an RPG-like world. You could even tie it back to the social tensions between the different types of players. I think it would be cool to see more knowledgeable characters using exploits in the game design to hold some sense of superiority over others. But we're getting kind of off topic, and what better way to recover from that than to talk about a pretty beloved anime by the name of Plastic Memories. This is the weirdest entry on this video since people don't really die in this show. Basically, in this world, a type of artificial intelligence called Giftia were created in order to serve as companions to actual people. They only last for around 9 years, and afterwards they have to be reset without any memories from their past life. When you think about it, this is a pretty disturbing thought. It's scary to think about how attached people would get to this idea if it were actually to exist. The entirety of this anime is basically building up to Isla's quote-unquote death at the end. The beginning of the story dedicates time to the main characters, Tsukasa along with Isla going on jobs to retrieve the Giftia that had been lent out to people. Some were compliant with the rules, but others grew too emotionally close to the respective AI, like in the first episode when an old lady had to say goodbye to essentially her adopted child. Other people started to love their Giftia as partners in life and tried to run away with them, but couldn't avoid the system. Eventually, the protagonist, Tsukasa, falls in love with his partner Giftia, and all of the arcs in the show utilize the artificial death of certain characters to raise the central question behind all of this. Is there a way to keep or at least expand the lifespan of these Giftia? And with each progressive order of events, the anime continually answers that question with a hard no. The expiration, or I guess termination, of Marcia specifically leaves a big impact on the main cast. It serves to show the consequences of leaving a Giftia active after it runs out of time. You see, once a Giftia's lifespan is up, they don't shut down by themselves. They actually start to malfunction and become really violent, which is why it's important for our heroes to retrieve them before that happens. In one particular case, a Giftia named Marcia was kidnapped by a Giftia kidnapper near the end of her time limit, and as a result, Tsukasa was forced to put her down the good old-fashioned way. On its own, this is a sad moment in the show that's used very effectively to crush the morale of our heroes, but it also serves as a great reminder that no matter the situation, you can't fuck with the rules. They're there for a reason, and you are no exception to that reason. After that first question is answered definitively, Tsukasa comes up with a new goal, which is to make the best of the time he has now, rather than live to regret it later. This is a great way to build up the climax of the story, which is as sad and soul-crushing an ending as you can really get. While I'm getting into technical deaths in anime, a more recent example of that would be from one of the hottest shows out right now. Jujutsu Kaisen starts off as a relatively simple shonen anime, but it quickly turns itself on its head by showcasing one of the most shocking character deaths I've personally seen in a long time. Now yes, it is revealed that Yuji is still alive after the fact, but this twist hits hard in the moment. This single event changed my entire perception of the show as well as the characters. Firstly, we get more insight into how Megumi views himself as well as how he's personally affected by Yuji's death. I find it to be refreshing that the characters acknowledge the fact that they only knew Itadori for a short time, so part of the reason why they're so torn up about it is because of their own personal nuances. Obviously, the most important dynamic revealed in this instant is the relationship between the main character and his inner demon. A lot of people have already made note of the fact that Sukuna is a very different take on this inner demon trope, since he honestly couldn't care less about what happens to Yuji. The moment that Sukuna rips Itadori's heart out, there comes a realization that the thought of Yuji controlling Sukuna at his full power was foolhardy at best. It gives you a good idea of how powerful our hero will need to get in order to overcome his final obstacle. There's also strong build-up for how this relationship will work from now on. At this point in time, Sukuna is only using Yuji's body because he's interested in Megumi's development as a sorcerer, so it really does feel as though Sukuna could get rid of his present vessel at any time without any problems. But since he's keeping him for now, the threat that he'll grow even more powerful than he is at present makes for pretty unsettling foreshadowing. This presents a really interesting dynamic between the two that I'm very eager to see continue in the future. Anyways, point of this video is there are a lot of different ways to explore death as a concept and incorporate it into your story. Whether it's used to flesh out your characters or the world that a writer has come up with, in the right scenario, death can be a key piece of storytelling. Other times, it only serves the purpose of hammering a certain idea into your head, and sometimes it doesn't even have to be a literal death. All that matters is that some kind of idea is made no longer present. Any of these methods would be equally effective, and there are probably other ways to use this that I'm not thinking of. It's cool to see writers put their own creative spin on these seemingly basic topics, and I thought it would be fun to talk about. Anyways, that's the end of the video, though I'm pretty sure there are a lot of other anime I could have covered, but I think I went over all of the ones I really wanted to. So if you enjoyed the video and stuck around all the way until the end, thank you so much, and if I'm on schedule, I'll be talking about something else next week. Until then.